a very warm welcome to this community engagement programme on a filthy evening. I think we've dodged the rain, and I hope that we dodge the rain going home. It is wet out there, take care that you don't slip. I'm the independent chair. My name is the Reverend Karen Wellman, and I'm the vicar of St Mark's Church. We're so famous, we've had a bus stop named after us. We're just around the corner from the bus stop. My role is to be independent, to make sure that our lovely councillors don't get political, to make sure that you don't get political. And by a stunning coincidence, my first degree is in politics. So anyone trying to slide anything political under the carpet, I'll spot it. St Mark's Church has a connection with Normansfield. The vicar there was the chaplain when this place was still a hospital. And I'm delighted to say that at least 10% of my congregation are learning disabled, and they are full and much loved members of our congregation. We're quite unusual in that we're a local church. We don't have people commuting for miles to come to us. We are very local, and it's a real privilege to be here tonight. So that's my role. I've got a lot of bits of paper here. I need to make sure that I tell you all the right things. One thing I have to tell you is that if there is a fire, you need to go out that fire exit because they've blocked that one. So out the way you came in, and if someone can carry me downstairs, because I've broken a bone in my foot and I can't go down the stairs. Thank you so much for that. I've got the important things sorted. So, I need to introduce the ward councillors. Dylan, Robin, and Jim.
Hi.
There you go. Now then, I've told you that this is a non-political meeting. These meetings are being held around the different parts of Richmond. I'm here to make sure that we stay to time, and we will. We're here to discuss local issues, council consultations, and to suggest projects for local funding streams, including ward-based budgets, requests, and all other things where we need to facilitate councillors, yourself, and the local Richmond Borough Council. To start with, I'm going to ask Robin to give us a few issues. Then we've got some questions that were given to us in advance, and then we will open the floor to questions. So if you've got something burning that you want to ask, formulate it in a short 1 or 2 sentence question, please. And then what we'll do is the microphone will come to you. Have we got the microphone? I'm meant to demonstrate how you need to use the microphone. The microphone is there. You need to hold it, I'm told, as if you are eating an ice cream without licking it. If you hold the microphone too low, nobody will hear, and that is a disability discrimination issue. We need to make sure that everybody can hear. Also, it's being recorded, and your question needs to be recorded for posterity. So please, good microphone management when we get there. But now, if I can turn to Councillor Robin Brown.
Thank you, Karen. And thank you everyone for coming along on a somewhat stormy and wet evening. So we really appreciate you coming to this Hampton Wick only event for this time. So we've often shared our community conversation events with Teddington. I'm very pleased that our Teddington councillors have not deserted us. So Councillors Ellenbourne and Baker are here to answer any more Teddington-related questions or areas of their particular expertise, which they have a lot. So they're here to help. Thank you for coming. I'm just going to give a couple of apologies because Mark Merrington, Chair of the Hampton Wick Association, can't be here, and nor can Sheena Harold. She's the Chair of the Teddington Society, because we managed to organise this event on the same evening as Richmond in Bloom, because they're very keen components of Richmond in Bloom and having a beautiful floral borough. They are there handing out awards, I believe, tonight. So they can't be here. And also Brian Holder gave his apologies. He's the chair of the transport section of the Telling Society, but I know that he's briefed his moles to ask various questions, so don't worry, his issues will be covered. So we're 3 new councillors, Jim and Gillian and I, so we've been in post now for about 18 months, and this section is badged as achievements. That sounds quite grand and also slightly intimidating if you're new, so I'm going to canter through a few things that have been going on in the ward and things we've been working on. I leave it to the electorate to judge whether we've been working hard enough on your behalf or not. Just a flavour of some things that are going on. I'll try and theme them a little bit. So think about the wider environment of Hampton Wick. A big issue has always been, ever since I got involved in local politics, was the Udney Park development. Udney Park, very near to Teddington, but actually just falls within the Hampton Wick ward boundary. And your local councillors, that's true for Hampton Wick and Teddington, we're firmly against the proposal to develop on Udney Park, which very clearly conflicts with a large number of the council's planning policies and also the mayors of London's planning policies, and is also opposed by Sport England. So we're doing our best to oppose that. It's been a complex process. There's been quite a lot of legal toing and froing. The next big step is going to be a hearing which is going to be held, I think, in the council offices, a public inquiry basically in November. So the council has broadly said that it's opposed to it. There's been an appeal by Quantum, who are keen to promote the development, and that's going to go to a planning inspector who's going to come and take evidence from all the parties. It won't get decided immediately after that because there are some complexities around local green space designation and various things that need to be sorted out before he can offer his final opinion. That's clearly a topic of local interest. Other things more generally on the local environment, we're very pleased to have had some trees planted in Hampton Wick. The Hampton Wick Association have been pushing very hard for trees to be planted. If you go down to the King's Field, you'll find there's been quite a few fruit trees planted down there, which we're really happy about. You'll also see down there some new play equipment. So we've had play equipment installed both down at the King's Field and also here in Langdon Park. So there's a public, council-owned play area in Langdon Park. Unfortunately, it was vandalised out of operation for quite a long period of time. It's now back in use, fortunately. Let's cross our fingers and hope that it doesn't get damaged. Again, because council budgets are limited and we can't constantly replenish the equipment, but we're happy to say that at the moment the 2 play areas are back in action, which is great. One more thing on the general environment, and this is something that was a topic that was raised a couple of community conversations ago, back under the old administration at Teddington School, was what's known as the hole in the ground behind Priya's, just opposite the station. If anybody's been there and seen it, it's a real eyesore there. We have had some success in having it cleared up and boarded up, so at least for those walking past, it's now not quite as offensive an eyesore as it was before. Still a problem for the people who live above it, but that's some of the local environmental work. Community projects-wise, delighted, I think, Carol and Mark Buckley are here from the Hampton Wick Association, and we're very happy that the council has just recently granted £80,000 for a project to refurbish the Bullen Hall. That'll make it a much better space for community organisations to use. And by refurbishing the kitchen, we should also enable we're hoping it will allow the library to stay open during lunchtimes, because the library is only open in Hampton Wick 3 days a week as it is, and it currently closes at lunchtimes, which is clearly not ideal. So fantastic work. I say that as councillors we've supported it, but it's already been led by the community and by the Hampton Wick Association in particular. And they've come up with this plan, which I think will be a real benefit. We were very happy to support that application to the community fund, which has been granted. Also very pleased to welcome Chris Manning, from Sheddington. So likewise, we're delighted to have seen the Sheddington charity starting up locally in the St Mark's Church grounds, making good use of a very run-down garage, starting up a sort of, I don't know what it was originally described as a man shed concept, but it's now much wider than that. So there's different streams. It's certainly not just men. It's broadly trying to engage people in mending, fixing, creating, activities. I think Chris are open on Saturdays generally, helping to do up the Scout Hall, and again has been given a grant from the council.
Hall. It's not the Scout Hall.
Told it already.
Yeah, that's right.
The small hall is often occupied by the Scouts.
It is used for 2 evenings by the Scouts.
There we are. We're very happy to support those community projects. Other areas, roads, often a controversial topic. So many people may have been to the last community conversation where 20 mile an hour was discussed at some length. 20 mile an hour is coming. It's being rolled out currently in Hampton. It will be coming to Hampton Wick before too long. I can't quite tell you exactly when. It's recently been agreed, actually, or it's been consulted, that although the A310, which is the Kingston Road, Upper Teddington Road and the High Street, was going to be taken out of the 20 mile an hour, we're looking to, in fact, bring the High Street back into that. So in the first round of implementation, Hampton Wick High Street should be included, and the 30 mile an hour will then restart, basically once it got under the railway bridge, going that way. Has been promised, and it is ongoing, that there will be a full safety corridor review of the A310. So although that whole stretch from Upper Teddington Road, Kingston Road, then Broadbury Vale and on into Twickenham is going to be 30 mile an hour to start with, it may be that the corridor review comes back with traffic calming measures to help improve the safety of that road, and it's possible that there may be recommendations for 20 mile an hour on that stretch as well, but that will be subject to consultation with local residents. If I speak about an area I know quite well, literally just outside where I live on Munster Road and just by St Mark's, that is one of the accident hotspots in the borough for interactions between pedestrians, in particular school children, and vehicles. We have so many people milling around that area after school in Teddington. So I'm very keen to see that area as in particular as somewhere where traffic is calmed and the speeds are lower. So that's 20 mile an hour. The other thing to mention on the roads is we have been talking a bit to the traders on the high street, and the high street shops can come and go. It can be quite challenging operating on the high street. Parking is often cited as something that would be helpful. So we've talked to officers about, can we squeeze more parking in on Hampton Wick High Street. We've managed to achieve, I think, 5 in the end more parking spaces. Also extended the hours of operation of some of the parking there from 1 hour to 2 hours. So these are small things, hopefully, to help encourage the high street. We're keen, if anybody's got any other ideas, we're keen to do what we can to support the traders in Hampton Wick High Street. On to public transport. So key thing for us from we're going to get political for a moment if I mention the Lib Dems. Am I allowed to do that? Mention the Lib Dems. We've been campaigning for step-free access for Hampton Wick Station. So we ran a petition, we've leafleted. We have had some success. So we were successful in getting Network Rail and South West Railways to nominate the station for funding for lifts to make it accessible to all. I've been photographed outside with Scotty as part of the campaign. So that was a good news, and they nominated us for funding to the Department for Transport in the latest funding round. The bad news is we didn't actually secure the funding, so many projects get put forward and the DFT set priorities. I think the good news is what it's meant is it's now firmly on the radar for the council and also for the rail authorities, who are clearly supportive, which is great. So the need has been recognised, and we will keep pushing. We won't want to give up. And in particular, what has been said once before is, can't you wait till a Crossrail comes along? Because in theory, at that point, Hampton Wick Station will get a makeover. But our view is we can't wait that long. I mean, who knows when Crossrail will actually turn up and when funding will be in place. So we'll keep pushing for that. The other one I'll mention, just to say that we recognise it as an issue and we keep raising it with Transport for London, is many people in Hampton Wick are keen to have a local bus service that goes directly from Hampton Wick, the quickest way along the street of Strawberry Vale, directly into Twickenham and then potentially on to Richmond, and that kind of does join up our borough as well, because it's easy to get to Kingston but less easy to get into Twickenham. I can't raise any hopes on that one because TfL have got no money at the moment, and at the moment they're taking routes out and reducing frequency rather than going the other way. So I'm more recognising it as a point that we know local people are keen on, and we would keep mentioning at the transport liaison meetings. We haven't yet had a breakthrough. We'll keep mentioning it.
I mentioned it's, sorry to chip into your speech, but just when we talked about it, how the
It always works.
you know, yeah, sorry.
You work with an actor in this talk.
It's also very popular with people outside this ward, further down the corridors. So, there you go. That was it. Carry on. You're doing a lovely job.
Thank you. That's great. I've only got 2 more things to say. One is, of course, lots of the work we do is on a more of a sort of day-to-day basis. It's casework, it's things that people bring us individually, it's all local issues. I'm not going to attempt to cover the vast range of subjects that we do deal with. But what I am going to mention, particularly with Councillor Ellen Bourne here, is that we've had as a council, we've declared a climate change emergency, and we've recently launched a climate change and air quality strategy. If you haven't already looked at that, I would encourage you, please do go on the website, look at the materials that are there. You might find Martin pictured with David Attenborough, if you're lucky, who's a local resident and very supportive of the work that we're doing. We've committed to make the borough's activities, as in the council's own activities, carbon neutral by 2030. But we're really looking to try and engage people locally in that initiative. There's a youth summit happening, which is fully booked. There's an adults summit happening, which we're keen to encourage people to go along to. But we're also very keen for people to go online and engage in consultation. So that's the end of the push for that. But it's clearly a very important topic for all of us, but particularly for our children and our children's children. So something that we need to, I think, take seriously as a council, as a Richmond community, and as a country. That's it from me. I think are we on to questions now?
I think we are now. The first two, I think we're going to take the first 2 questions are about cycling. So, Christopher Coveney, we need you to hold the microphone like an ice cream.
Thank you. Christopher Coveney, Lumsden Road. Does the Borough Council have any plans to introduce segregated cycling lanes in the borough in the manner in which Kingston Borough Council is doing?
We have a second cycle question. Now, is Paul Martin here? Okay, so if I read Paul Martin's question, are you happy to take both of them together?
Okay.
Okay. Imagine I'm Paul Martin at this stage. What is the council doing to protect pedestrians from cyclists who ignore the highway code, riding on the pavement, particularly along Church Grove and Park Road, after the shared use section? I would also mention ignoring the give way to the cycle path near the foot of Kingston Bridge, the pedestrian crossings where pedestrians become slalom poles to be ridden around, cyclists typically filtering between the lanes, approaching the pedestrian crossings, which is also contrary to the highway code, never mind riding the wrong way down the one-way section of Park Road. Cyclists, Dylan.
Christopher, thank you very much for your question. It's something that's, with the council as a whole, is fully backing behind encouraging cycling, pedestrian, public transport, so on. Following on from your question, I'll go on there first. The council is currently developing plans for protected cycling infrastructure on Strawberry Vale and Cross Deep, which link Hampton Wick to Twickenham. The council will soon be consulting on its active travel strategy, which will include ambitions for a borough-wide network. So this is something that's on our agenda in a big way. So Hampton Wick ward, including South Teddington, is a big part of it, but across the whole borough, it is a massive focus of the council, and we will be doing our best to achieve those. Following on with that, with Paul Martin's question, yes, we do get that, and it's quite a balancing act trying to get everybody happy and get everything into place at the right time. But unfortunately, it's not the council's responsibility to enforce the highway code. So where possible, the council is looking at to improve conditions for cyclists and potential cyclists. The council is currently reviewing one-way streets in the borough to formalise more contraflow cycling, which may result in less pavement cycling, which we know is a concern. And to add to that, on top of that, so I'm not sitting here for the next 20, 30 minutes going through, there is information available on our website, on the Richmond Council website, regarding what we are looking at and how we plan on implementing those.
Or did you want to come back? Or are you okay with that?
That's Chris.
Chris, I'm so sorry. Christopher, do you want to come back on that? Okay. Fantastic. So we have another question. Is George Jones here? Lovely. So we can have you.
Yes, the question concerns the High Street, Hampton Wick High Street at the moment, and my question was, will the council view with favour a conversion to residential use in the case of ground floor shops which have been abandoned?
So thank you for the question. I think as I mentioned in my introduction here, we are very keen to keep Hampton Wick High Street as alive and as vibrant as we can. Many high streets up and down the country are challenged at the moment for reasons that have been sort of quite well publicised. I think the good news is the vacancy rate on Hampton Wick High Street is actually not that high at the moment. I mean, I think you walk along, there's probably 2 or 3 vacancies, I would guess, not that much more than that. So that's quite good. It has on occasion been worse than that. The technical answer to the specific question is that there are planning guidelines which would apply to looking at a conversion from retail to residential. So there's various development plan policies, LP25 development centres, LP26 retail frontages, LP27 local shops and services. Perhaps more usefully, the planning department has said that if there's a particular property that you're interested in converting, or you're interested in...
No, absolutely not.
You're more interested in the general principle. Yeah, so I think that if anybody who owns those premises, if they are interested, they can talk to the council on a pre-application basis to get some guidance as to whether conversion is likely to be allowed or not. It would have to go through planning because it's a conservation area. You can't use permitted development rights to just make it happen without going through a formal planning process. And it's a balancing act, I guess. There's already quite a bit of residential on Hampton Wick High Street. So there's big offices converted historically. There's some other premises which have been converted to residential. We do need to try and keep a balance, where ideally we have a mix of retail, some employment with offices, and residential as well.
I can manage that.
Oh, you did? Okay. Yeah, okay. Well, point taken, but the reference specifically was to the ground floor, because there are various properties which are at the moment in mixed use. It appears that you've got the commercial ground floor and above is flats already. Now, it seems to me that the ground floor is likely to be the problem area, because you couldn't actually have a dwelling there without doing quite a lot of work, altering the front things like that. Certain of them have actually been apparently abandoned for quite a while. And whereas I think it's not the job of any of us here to take commercial decisions about whether this, that or the other is a good business, nonetheless, when you've got something persistently empty for a long while, I think a signal is being sent that it's not wanted in that purpose. And I really would urge you to look carefully at, above all, the ground floor question. There was one property that has been derelict for a long time, where it appears that all 3 floors of it are derelict. So I would urge you to just be a bit more proactive on this.
Can I ask which one you have in mind that's the particular one that's been vacant for a long time?
Vacant for a long time on all floors, I think is number 13 off the top of my head, I think 13.
I think that might be the infamous AM/PM store.
Indeed.
Which I think does actually have somebody living in that property and has done for some time. I think it's a slightly odd situation, that property. So I think effectively it is already residential. Doesn't look like it, but it is.
Okay. I mean, there are others where one can see that the upper floors are occupied, but the ground floor plainly is not.
And then I think that's a commercial matter for the owner of the property to decide whether they want to apply to the council to be able to convert or not.
Yes, quite.
Thank you. Is Helena in the room? Okay, I will read her question. This is one for you, Jim.
Oh.
Are you doing this?
Okay, yes.
Are you doing that one?
Yes, go on then.
A decision by the councillors, we're doing this one. Helena's question is whether anything can be done about the noise levels in flats. Helena lives in a flat, a nice flat, but the noise travels down from the flat above. Richmond Housing Partnership does not wish to do anything about this. Is there anywhere that residents can go for help?
Yes, and I wish Helena was here because I'm very concerned to hear that she doesn't feel like there's anywhere she can go for help. Richmond Housing Partnership and all the housing associations that provide social housing for us in this borough have a duty to react to any issues like this that are raised with them, and the other duty I would say they have is to make it very clear to all their residents how they go about that, to be open and accessible. And part of the reason for doing this, of course, the community conversation is all part of our community engagement activities. It's about trying to make sure that there is open and transparent conversation and two-way flow between residents and the council. It's important for housing associations to do that as well. So, but the fact remains she isn't here. Is anyone here a tenant or a leaseholder of a housing association? No, clearly. Often those people, statistics have shown us in our surveys that they are generally harder to reach by these sorts of methods, and we're doing a lot of work with the community engagement team to look at ways we can speak to people who are seldom heard in these sort of matters. The fact remains, just to quickly answer it, and for anyone who's watching, the first thing to do is to contact your housing association, in this case Richmond Housing Partnership. As I say, they have a duty to investigate any noise nuisance issues and to act on those where appropriate. The caveat to that is, of course, that different noise nuisance has different remedies. Some are statutory nuisance, and those are clearly, if they're out of normal hours, if it's late at night or early in the morning. But often in some flat conversions, particularly, normal household noise can transfer down to the flat below. And if it's just things like the sound of footsteps and doors opening and shutting, that can be irritating, but it's not classed as a statutory nuisance, and RHP may find it difficult to act on that or to find an appropriate remedy for that situation. Nonetheless, I understand it's still a problem, and as well as being a ward councillor, I'm tenants champion for Richmond Council, which is a role that involves mediating in long-running disputes between tenants and leaseholders of housing associations and their landlords. And so I see quite a few of these sort of cases, and really important thing in all of this is being good neighbours, I think. It's the best remedy to any of these solutions is to be able to talk to your neighbour, but I appreciate that's not always possible, because sometimes people don't realise that little things they're doing might be making noise transference happen. Of course, it is important, and most leaseholds have tenancy agreements that state you must have carpets and underlay in your flat. It may be that that's been overlooked, maybe the previous tenant didn't stick with that. So there may be routes for RHB to look at it via that there may be something can be enforced via the tenancy agreement that they need to put down a rug or carpeting, which may help. So that's really my response, and I'll try and find out if I can get back to Helena outside of this and help her further. Thank you.
Thank you. So those were our questions in advance. So I hope you've got some questions. If you have, can you give me a wave? So gentleman in the front.
Thanks. I'm James Heath, speaking right now for the Teddington Society. I don't know if people are aware, we've talked a bit about Crossrail 2, which seems a very long way away, but it's going to have huge impact for a lot of us in this ward. Specifically, the moment the plan is a large proportion of the trains are going to come through Kingston, they come through Hampton Wick. Hampton Wick's going to have a much improved service, but they're going to be turned around after Hampton Wick and sent back into London. And first of all, it's a huge opportunity lost for anyone who lives within the circle of Teddington. So the first question is, what are Teddington councillors, what are you doing to lobby, whatever British Rail is, the rail service and rail train and so forth, to have the turnaround beyond Teddington, which would obviously improve things significantly. And secondly, there's going to be a lot of disruption for anybody who lives along Fairfax Road or on the railway side of Sandy Lane, because the plan is to build new sidings in the ward, which is going to be very disruptive in the building, but actually also in the operation for many years to come, because of all the trains that are going to be turned around. There are existing sidings up at Strawberry Hill, which could be used for this. So, sorry, that's a very long introduction, but the question is, what are the councillors doing? We're lobbying hard as Teddington Society, but we need some support. We don't feel we're getting any support at the moment from the council.
Okay, so which of our Hampton Wick councillors wants to start?
I'll take that one briefly, but I may hand over to the Teddington councillors here. If I'm honest, it's something that hasn't really featured that heavily for the three of us over the last 18 months. That's probably because consultation had already closed by the time that we were elected, because there was a consultation which people could respond to in terms of Crossrail plans, but that window is closed. So I can't say that I'm aware of the issues, because I'm aware of the Teddington Society position on that, and I'm aware of the suggestion that it would be more efficient to turn around at Strawberry Hill instead. But I can't say that we've been actively lobbying on that as your local councillors here.
So just to be fair, the specific plans have only just become being issued. So they've come out over the last 12 months odd. So there was a consultation, and now these plans are starting to come out and crystallising, and now we can see the actual impact. So actually now is a really good time to be saying there are some problems here.
It'd be great to hear
Martin
more.
This actually has been going for several years, this issue. It's not correct that it's the first time anyone has heard of it in the last 12 months. The point that the rail operators and Network Rail make is the intention is to turn the train round at Kingston, and that is the destination for the trains that they want to reverse. There are other trains going through to Shepperton, and there are going to be just as many trains going through to Teddington as now. But those that they want to reverse it to Kingston, the only place to do that is beyond Hampton Wick, so that is where they plan to do it. It would need a completely new timetable if they were to reverse at Strawberry Hill. The point has been put to them repeatedly, and they have repeatedly said this is not a proposition that they will entertain. And I don't think there's any scope for going further on this. think the Technical Society have been told this repeatedly also. So I think one is, the door is shut and it's not actually before us as a proposition anymore.
I just feel there's very little awareness within the ward of as to what these plans are, and it's just a massive opportunity lost. I don't quite understand why we haven't pressed hard.
I understand what you're saying, and I've heard people talking about it on the doorstep, and like Robert says, having come into this after the closing of the consultation and having had this advice that this is the position of Network Rail, that's been the response. Look, this is, we are your councillors, and if you have a strong group of you that want a view represented, then we're happy to do that. But I think we also have to be realistic about what the advice is. But it's not that I'm not going to turn around to you and say I'm not going to put that forward. Let's be realistic.
I think the other point to make is that to look at the opportunities presented by Crossrail coming through. It means we'll have destinations other than Waterloo. There'll be a whole range of transport opportunities coming from this. And rather than concentrating on the best can almost often be the enemy of the good, and I think we should celebrate what is going to happen. Probably I'll be dead, but by 2030 we could end up with a vastly better train service for both Hampton Wick, Teddington and remember, for those of us who are still alive, we'll have lifts at Hampton Wick. And by the way, while I'm on my feet, the lifts at Teddington station, there is a problem affecting the shed adjacent to the footbridge, which is owned by the nursery, who are recalcitrant and difficult about selling it to Network Rail, and it's going to have to be compulsorily purchased. And when that has happened, the lifts at Teddington station, which I know many of you probably use, will be in there by 2022.
Thank you. Do we have another question, please? Lady at the back.
Hi, I'm Carrie Daly. I'm in Lower Teddington Road, and I've lived in the borough about 22 years, I think it's been. So I'm in this part, I'm longer in Richmond as a whole. I have two questions, but one actually was the lady who had to leave, so maybe it won't count against me if I can read both. Basically, I've never seen so much development in such a short space of time. And Robin was wonderful. He came down, he walked the area with me. Lower Teddington Road is a very historical area. I'm at the very end of it near the Swan, just a little bit further up. And I was shocked at how much development did go on, but that's not my question because it's all been approved. It's been a huge turnaround in such a short space of time. What I'm worried about is the loss of green space, which isn't actually designated parkland. It's just green space that's developed over the years in sort of unused and disused space that encourages bird life, encourages little bits of wildlife. And I feel that we need to start to recapture that before it goes completely. Maybe we need to think about it in a different way. Maybe not parkland tree planting, but street tree planting, maybe trees that are appropriate for the area. Or within the new developments, we need to be looking at what kind of micro-management of green space, places that people like Robert McFarlane have talked about, the wild spaces that can be used to encourage our bird life, encourage our insect life. So I wonder whether we should get some joined up thinking between the environmental planning people, the tree people, if they're a different agency, and the planning department, and us to be maybe even a leader in the borough for making these micro green spaces part of our whole. I mean, I'd be happy to work on it with somebody as a volunteer, actually, also. So that's my kind of suggestion, and also just to make a point that this rapid development is very destabilizing for people who've been here a long time, especially as it's such a small area, it's a tiny peninsula that we're talking about that's being constantly under threat because of its access to the river, access to the station, and its historicity. It's kind of got a lot of things going for it that hadn't been discovered before. So we need to be really vigilant to protect it, is what I'm kind of saying. And I do thank Robin again for the time he took coming to speak to me about it. So that's my first point.
Okay, can we take that one first?
Yes,
then?
that's fine.
So, is that one for you, Jim?
I think it's been pretty clear since we've come in the ward and overall as a council that green space and environment is a priority. And we are putting in measures when it comes to future planning applications, future buildings and everything, that there has to be an element of eco and environmental sustainability as part of those applications. And all the plans, including our new environment, climate consultancy and everything that's going, is part of that. So we take on board 100% what you're doing, and we're all on board with that, and that is a main priority. And I think that New Park and places like that is a big testament to that's green space. We don't want you there. Please go. So yes, that's a big part of what we want to do as ward councillors and council.
Can I add that we've got the biodiversity strategy coming out as well, which is a very important part of what you're saying, that as much green space as possible must be given over to not just grass but to wildflowers and all sorts of and the proper sorts of planting that will allow insect life and other animal life to flourish. But that's mainly about council-owned strips of land. It's about grass verges, it's about things like that and areas of parkland. But you're talking also about what are currently green spaces that are privately owned, is that right?
Yes, part of the commercial, the development going from commercial to residential. They're just taking those, I mean, in some cases they are looking like they're wasted space, but they're not wasted space. I just think that rather than looking at that perspective, we should think, well, what else is that supporting? Is it supporting some kind of natural element? Things that have been picked up by other people, nature writers. And it's something very grand. I don't mean it like that. I mean, just trees and birds that are getting knocked down and taken down when you're developing, that we just need to be conscious of. We are lucky to be, we've got lovely parklands, but we also need it within the borough, in the little environment we're living in. So I'm just... That goes on to the second question quite nicely. It was Jenny from Hampton Wick Association mentioned the actual mowing of the verges. She's very hot on that. She said, could we please stop mowing the verges? Because she likes the wildflowers, and that's something I think maybe she might have spoken to you, Dylan, about it. But she asked us specifically at our convention, please stop mowing the verges, because she'd like to encourage the bees, the insect, and the wildflowers.
And I think we are stopping. Yeah.
Well, there's or changing. I understand there's parts that are being tested the way we're going to start looking at those kind of things, but yeah, 100%. And I know Jenny knows I'm a big advocate of that. Well, a lot of it looks like that. So so it's a big courage. But from my understanding, is there are parts of the borough that are being tested for verge growing and so on. Obviously, you've got to get that balance between not being obstructive as well, and you've got to get that there between everything. But yeah, we're fully behind that.
Well, I'm leading by example in my own back garden. There's a lot less effort in trying to keep those lawns pristine, and if the leisure run right, it's fine. I'm just going to put a quick plug in for Chris's bee holiday.
Sorry,
Sorry, Mark. Well, I just wanted to mention that Chris has got a bee pollination session on Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday at Mark Small Hall, encouraging bees in your own private back gardens. And it will be happening. We've got a wildflower meadow coming at St Mark's. It might look as if we've forgotten to mow the grass, but we're trying to create a wildflower meadow, which isn't easy. So if I can hand it.
Yeah, two comments if I may. One is a surprising proportion of the land in this borough is private gardens. And how they're maintained can make, or not maintained, can make a real contribution to nature flourishing. I cut my lawn perhaps twice a year, perhaps not even that. There's no need to keep cutting your lawn. Grass is not the only thing that will grow in a lawn. In fact, given the fact that our climate is changing, it's probably fairly ridiculous to try and make your lawn predominantly grass. All the other things are much more supportive of bees and wildlife and anything else. The other issue that people are quite rightly concerned about is the loss of front gardens to car parking. And one of the things that we're going to do, which I did in my front garden 15 years ago, is if you have a hard surface front garden, you can bring it back to something soft and green. And we're going to, once the officers actually get around to organising a competition, we're going to have a competition so that people who've done that might be noticed and honoured for doing so, because it's a simple thing to do, and it makes People who walk by enjoy what they see, and seeing bees on a plant is actually a good deal more attractive than seeing a row of cars on a hard surface. I think we can do all those things. We have some negative people who say, why haven't you cut the grass? You haven't honoured the deceased in the cemetery because you haven't cut the grass as often as you used to. But the climate change emergency has been mentioned, and we've got to make steps to make a world that's a little bit more friendly to not only our children and grandchildren, but all the other species with which we share the planet.
And it's also this week been declared that the most important being on the planet is the bee. So, we fully behind that. In fact, the most important being. It's not us anymore. We need to forget about ourselves.
Okay, lady down here.
Hello, I live to the rear of Hampton Wick station on the station road, and quite often cars come and leave their engines running while they're waiting for people to come out of the station. And I'm wondering whether we could have a sign or something just asking people very nicely whether they could turn off their engines.
Yes, I have been talking to officers about this, and there are plans to install some extra signage to do that.
Oh, great, thanks.
So that's a nice quick answer.
Nice simple one. Another question, please. Gentleman here.
Robert Blake, I live in King Edward's Grove. I had a comment on the 20 mile an hour limitation in the borough. I think everybody's generally in agreement that they're happy with 20 miles an hour in the residential side streets. Makes good sense. However, I've yet to meet anybody who is really supportive of taking away the current speed limits on the main roads through the borough, and also taking into consideration that you can probably very rarely during the normal part of the day achieve much more than 25 miles an hour down there, which again I think is quite a reasonable speed in the borough. 20 miles an hour alone is really far too low for a main road and can produce its own problems. And just to follow through on your previous comment, Robin, about the particularly hazardous region around the shops on Kingston Road there, there is actually some traffic calming there at the moment at the pedestrian crossing lights, of course. And the biggest hazard, and I did see two of them as I was coming to this meeting today, police cars going about 40, 50 mile an hour through there. And of course that's happening all the time, and Dylan and I are already in discussion about that and trying to put some leverage on the police. My kitchen window looks right down onto the shops further up to the north of Kingston Lane, so I see what's going on all the time, and this is day and night, and the speed and the way that they just go down that road is completely, generally unacceptable. Everybody's going to be in agreement. If there's a serious emergency, of course, twos and blues all the way, question of life and death. The other hazard I encountered coming down, I think we've already touched on, you get out of the way of a cyclist on the pavement, which again is
Okay.
So that's just a wrap up on the whole
so
thing, just to see what people think in
So the
general about
question
that.
is about 20 miles an hour and on that stretch of road, and it's also about the emergency services going down the road. So if Robin, if you can take that.
And cyclists
Well,
on the
okay.
pavement.
Yeah, we've already addressed that one.
I'll say I've probably been on a bit of a journey myself on 20 miles an hour because, when I first heard about it introduced, it was clear to me it was going to be residential only. And I was a bit of a, well, for me, when I understood that I had understood originally, but before I got involved really heavily in the Dems in campaigning, that 20 mile an hour would be residential only. And then I found out that our policy was going to be 20 mile an hour everywhere broadly, including the main roads. And for me, that was a bit of a, oh, right, that sounds a bit odd. And so I've been on a journey because I'm now fully supportive of our policy to roll 20 mile an hour out everywhere. And I'll tell you why. Firstly, a lot of the roads we regard as main roads, they are residential roads. So you may say you haven't met many people who are keen on having 20 mile an hour, for example, along Kingston Road. Well, I have, because quite a few people who live along Kingston Road were pretty upset about the fact that it got taken out of the 20 mile an hour proposal because they're concerned about safety and they see people speeding along that section. And I think what I've also seen is, organisations, for example, campaigning for 20 mile an hour along Hampton Wick High Street. I'll take that as an example. Now we've just agreed that will be included in the 20 mile an hour, but that's effectively a main road. But the Hampton Wick Association have been pushing for that to be included as 20 mile an hour because of the shops. You've got a lot of pedestrians crossing backwards and forwards. But actually, you can go all the way down Kingston Road and you can point out hotspots and areas why there are issues that are safety issues. And we've got to remember that the main reason we're doing 20 mile an hour is for road safety. That is the primary driver for putting 20 miles an hour in. So you go down Kingston Road, you've got a doctor's surgery pretty soon after the railway. Then you've got St Mark's area with the shops and Teddington School. You go further down, you get another parade of shops. We've had some very passionate
coming out of Langdon.
Well, Langdon Park. We've had some very passionate arguments down the Twickenham end about Strawberry Vale, particularly around the schools there. So the people who tend to live around these areas are equally passionate about why they want their area protected in the same way that other people's residential areas will be protected. So I'm now convinced that it is the right thing to do. I think a clear exception would be the 308 from Kingston roundabout to Hampton Court because there's nobody living along there and there's a perfectly good cycleway. There's no reason why that stretch shouldn't be 30 mile an hour, and we've put it back up to 30 mile an hour. It was 40, we're now taking it down to 30.
Oh, can I ask that if you're... Can I just hold on a moment? We can't hear unless you've got a microphone.
So I'm just trying to explain that I understand people finding it difficult. I understand because people are focusing on getting from A to B. Actually, the evidence won't take you that much longer. It will improve safety, and I'm now convinced it's the right thing to do. We'll wait for the results of the corridor study and see what that tells us.
Can I
should probably just focus on that, and we'll come back to the police cars because there's a whole separate issue about the sirens, which Jim might want to comment on.
But just quickly on that, sorry, Robin, to back up Robin on there as well, as mentioned in the about cycling and everything earlier. The whole thing about the 20 mile per hour and safety and everything is we're looking at improving cycling networks and everything, and that's all going to be part of the project moving forward. So it's all not just one thing that we're looking at. There's an overall thing to get people out of cars, cycling, pedestrians and everything. So that's all part of a bigger picture as well. So it's, I just want you to be aware of it. And
understood.
Thanks, Dylan. Yeah, and to come back on, is that okay if I just...
Yeah.
The other part of your question about the police...
Can we just allow this gentleman one very brief comment, please?
Well, I haven't really heard any good argument for it not being 30 yet. Just a sort of vague reference to safety. Where you are, Dylan, you can see there are good reasons, and it slows down, if you're lucky. But yeah, you could put a 20 up there and that wouldn't be unreasonable. 20 is a dangerous speed on a main road. They are what they say they are. Let me finish. They are main roads. They are there for the purpose of conveying traffic through the borough.
You've now made your point. If I could just pass, James wanted to make a quick comment.
Very, very quickly. If you want to get cyclists off the pavements, one of the best ways of doing it is to impose 20 miles an hour on main roads.
Okay, if I can go to Jim.
Thanks, James. And I think, if it saves one child's life, I'm happy to drive at 20 miles an hour. Now, talking about the blues and twos, I totally agree with you, and I know a lot of people here feel the same. We've had a lot of correspondence about this. It is really unacceptable, and it's a very unfortunate consequence of the massive underfunding of the police service, the huge cuts we're all aware of that the government has made over the last few years. Not only the 10,000 police officers who've been cut, which are talked about being reinstated, but the closures of many, many police stations and the amalgamation of police forces into service areas that are very large. We're now, our borough command unit encompasses 4 boroughs, and the fact is that the decision was made that Kingston Police Station would not be the home of its own rapid response units anymore, and that all the cars that have to go to emergencies in Kingston are now based in Twickenham. It's a nonsensical decision, except for the fact that the police force have been forced to save money, and it really is, beggars belief. I want to say very clearly that we work very closely with our local police, and we have huge support for them. They're doing a fantastic job with the resources they have, particularly our dedicated ward officers who are really committed, absolutely wonderful assets to this community and do fantastic work. But the fact remains that we have to be very clear on behalf of our residents that we find this unacceptable, and it really disturbs people. We have had lots of discussions with Sally Benatar and others about this, and she feeds down and has asked officers to try to make the right call about using those sirens. The trouble is that, as they make very clear to us, that those drivers are driving above the speed limit, and that you have to put safety as the #1 priority. If they don't sound their sirens when they're coming up to a junction, not only could they cause a collision, but they could also be basically putting themselves at risk of being drummed out of the police force for making the wrong decisions. So it's very hard to ask police, and perhaps that's not the answer. I think the answer, as I say, is to look at forcing, putting the pressure on, advocating to the top of the force, but also understanding that the force need that financial support from government. And I find it completely unbelievable that any government of this country...
I think we're edging...
politics, sorry. There you go. Well, there you go. But the answer is also, there is some temporary... I believe that this situation will change in due course. Certainly Kingston Police Station is going to be refurbished, and so there are going to be different arrangements. I think everyone from Kingston Police Station is going to be temporarily sited at Teddington, and then Twickenham will be moved to Teddington. So there are lots of moving about that may alter those traffic patterns in a temporary basis, and hopefully by the time that's all finished, we may be able to find that the police service is better funded again, and we can make some changes. I hope that's not too long. I did see that Chris wanted to come back on something. Is it connected to this? Yeah.
Okay.
Is that okay?
I think that we understand that this is a contentious issue. So thank you for all the opinions we've had so far. Chris, did you want to add something? Did you want to add a question there?
Well, I just wanted to support the fact that actually twice in the last 3 weeks I felt that I was close to being wiped out by, first of all, on my bike, cycling to Kingston. The police car had a siren on about 100 metres behind me. I couldn't actually sort of move in because there were cars parked. He must have gone by me, I should think, with about a foot to spare, and at speeds well in excess of 20 miles an hour. At a speed of less than that, I'd say he was doing probably up to 60 or 70 miles an hour. The second time was when I'd just come around by the traffic lights at the landmark to go towards Twickenham, and I got to that zigzaggy, chicanery bit by the first bend there, which people love to sweep round quickly, and a police car was almost on my side of the road, and I think nearly lost control of the vehicle. So I would like to propose that, in support of the police, that we question the whole policy about having police cars actually at Twickenham when they need to be based in Kingston. And I don't think we should settle for just... I think we should support the police officers who have to do this work, find out what their opinions are about having to do it, and really question a management decision or whatever other decision it is.
I
so it's just a point.
We do, and I think the point's well made, and has been well made, and it's been raised at pretty much every police liaison group meeting that I've been to recently, so we do have... Sorry?
You've got to go to the top. Who's the top person?
I think we need to move on. I think our councillors...
No, we need to sort this out.
We do.
Yeah, we have written down to Sally Bennett.
Yeah, just I live on the high street, so as per discussions we get that.
Okay, so I think we do understand that this is an emotive and contentious issue. So
we have people representing us, so they take forward our views, our problems, and where possible and practical ways to solve them out.
And we are doing our best.
Okay, I think it's been heard by... You've all heard, haven't you?
Yeah.
You've all heard?
Yeah, and I don't want to squash this down, but we do have to move on. But we do hear what you're saying. We're doing our absolute utmost to do it.
Okay. Do we... Deborah at the back.
It's just something I've noticed. I live in Seymour Road. I've lived in the area for many years. And we used to have a campaign in Britain, Keep Britain Tidy. And what I'm noticing, there's so much litter around. I think there are different issues to do with that. But one of them, I think, is what happens with recycling. There are people, I think, who come from the council or who have been commissioned by the council to take away our recycling, but there's plastic, paper strewn everywhere. Down in Devon, my parents have lids for their boxes, which really does help on a windy day. But can we do something about this, which will also help with climate change? And another thing I've picked up on, the local gentleman, the man who comes from the post office, lovely man, he explained to me they've been told they have to put junk mail through our door. And it just seems rather ridiculous because we get so much junk mail that comes through and then it goes out to recycling. That can't be cost effective to do that. And just one very quick thing, going back to what Chris Manning said, I nearly got run down today by a police car. I fully support the police. I was a social worker by background, but I was really shocked actually because the police car was really on the wrong side of the road, and I nearly got hit. Okay.
So, taking this
Luckily, you got two members of the chairman and a member of the environment committee, where we are very aware of the issue of litter and so on around, and we are following up on that in a big way, and there is a few things that are taking place, and we are looking into these things, so it's not gone unnoticed, and it's been brought up by ourselves and residents, so we are following up on that.
As I understand it, the waste and recycling contract is coming up for renewal, and we're hoping that this is part of the conversation. Would you like to talk about that?
I brought my crossword to dinner. I brought my crossword to dinner.
I think you've turned yourself off.
Okay, well, the situation on litter is we have an independent measurement of litter on our roads, and the level is unchanged. It's a very satisfactory level looking at the borough overall, which has not deteriorated. If you can get nets to put over your recycling bins if you want them, and some people like to do that, I think it's also incumbent upon residents to put out their recycling in the most effective and thoughtful way. And sadly, this doesn't always happen. Some people just chuckle that stuff out and expect the men who are proceeding at great speed down the road to deal with it. They are, by the way, paid below the London living wage, and we were putting that right in the new contract. The new contract will also have particular provision for clearing up afterwards, and we will do our very best to enforce that. But it's a two-way matter, and residents are not always as thoughtful as they might be in how they present their recycling. I personally believe you should make everything the same size as the bin you're putting it in, not just stick it all out and let the men comb. I think it's a two-way thing, and I think you've got to do your best to make it as easy as possible for these men who have a very hard job, at present are paid below the London living wage, and it's a two-way thing. But the level of complaints is fairly low, and we will do our very best with the new contract to improve things even further.
Okay,
Just one point about the junk mail observation. I believe it's possible to go to the post office and register with the post office and say you don't want junk mail delivered. And if you do make that registration, I think it can cut down significantly on the amount of unsolicited mail that comes through your door.
The lady over here.
Talking of litter, you know there are these big boxes at the station in Teddington or Normansfield Road, and sometimes they are absolutely full, and you have rubbish on top, besides, left and right, and this is really, I don't know how often it is planned that these boxes are emptied.
So just on that, there was a specific problem for a while because there is only, I think there's one lorry in the borough that goes around emptying these particular bins, and it was out of action for a while. And the fact that it was out of action caused a problem across these recycling centres across the borough. That's now been either fixed or we've hired a replacement vehicle, so we're back on the regular routine. I think, Martin might correct me, I think they do get visited once a week, these sites, generally. So, A, it should be better in the sense they should be being emptied more frequently. B, they do often attract fly tipping, but whenever that happens, we do contact the council, so I get advice sometimes of fly tipping around the recycling centres, and the council is generally pretty quick to respond to clear the fly tipping. Obviously, that's something we don't want to have, but it does happen on those centres quite a bit.
Yeah, the new contract will provide for a totally new vehicle to do the work. We've had a rather antiquated vehicle that has had to have constant repairs. Indeed, the whole of the refuse fleet is antiquated, and there'll be a totally new fleet when we start the new service in May. So things should be a lot better.
Okay, Chris. Sorry, there it is.
Madam Chair, you did give me the opportunity to ask a supplemental, I think, and perhaps I should have taken that, but in the light of some of the comments that I've heard, I wonder if I might perhaps address my remarks to Councillor Baxter. We've heard various comments about the traffic flying up and down Kingston Road and people riding on the pavement and that sort of thing. And you kindly told me that the council is looking at a strategy for cycling. May I urge you or ask you to prioritise certain things so that you don't have to come up with a complete strategy. You start putting places or bits in place. I was a little bit perturbed by the fact that when you spoke about the road from Kingston Bridge to Twickenham, that you were talking about Strawberry Vale across Dean. Now it seems to me that the the aim of the council should be to have a cycle lane that starts at Kingston Bridge, that goes through Twickenham, that goes through Richmond, and goes to Barnes. And that should be Richmond cycle lane, probably number 2, because there's one that comes down the 316, and that ought to be priority number 1. Now, the gentleman over here was talking about people cycling down the pavements. If you take Kingston Road as an example, there are various places where road improvements have actually encouraged people to cycle onto the pavement. There are places where a roundabout is to be avoided, and there are places where you can turn up, is it Fairfax Road or whichever road it is at the roundabout, where you're actually encouraged to go onto the pavement. Now, it's sometimes unclear where you should come off the pavement, but once you start encouraging people to cycle onto the pavement, you've got a problem, because they're on the pavement and they're going to want to stay there. Now, I think that a considerable improvement, and I think the prime case would be the Kingston Road and right the way through Twickenham, Richmond and to Barnes, would be a segregated cycle lane. Now this will involve money, and I realise that the council in pockets have limitations, but we have seen what is going on in Kingston. Whilst you're doing the cycleway Richmond number 2, may I ask you to address the question of buses in Twickenham? Before road improvements were made in Twickenham, what happened, this applies particularly to people at Hampton Wick, for example, taking the 281, that all the buses stopped in the centre of Twickenham in the same place. So if you were coming back, for example, from Richmond, and you got to Twickenham, you could get off a bus, and you would have a selection of routes. Now, the bus stops for these routes have been dispersed. So you guess which bus might come next. You might have an app on your phone. So you go to that stop to catch the R68 and miss the 281, which was the quicker bus. I'm sure there were reasons for changing the bus arrangements in Twickenham, but sometimes people get it wrong.
So
Okay.
that's not a council decision, that's a TfL decision.
That was a decision by the previous administration.
Can we slow down? Who's going to answer this one?
Good question, good question.
I'll just take the bus
Buses
stops
first?
in Twickenham just for a second
First.
while we're on that one, which is, to get political for a second, that was a decision taken by the previous administration which we did not agree with, and which, as you rightly say, I'm still in that corner, you know, waiting to zip that way or that way, depending on which bus I'm going to try and get on to get back home. The question is whether we now have the money or desire or can go through the process with TfL to put it back to how it was, because it was better before and it's got worse, but it was that odd.
Well,
Okay.
you've got the problem.
I know, you're right.
So, okay, that's buses. Who's going to tackle cycles?
Well, as mentioned earlier, there is a cycle plan that's coming in, and everything that's been taken in consultation and what everybody's saying is being looked at, and we are working with all the various cycling groups and so on throughout the borough with their feedback and needs and requirements to fit in with ours as well, and we're working towards putting a plan together. I can't confirm or say what those are because it is in that stage, but yes, that is being taken, the residential feedback is being considered.
Okay, so buses and cycles. Gentleman over there hasn't asked a question yet.
My name's John Anderson. I just wanted to follow up on your point about the mini roundabouts at Kingston Lane, Kingston Road. I wanted to know whether any assessment had been made of the impact of that on nearby roads. I live in Langham Road, and therefore the cut through from Teddington High Street to that roundabout, where you only need to get across one lane now, has exacerbated the problem of traffic in Langham Road. In the rush hour, it's queued. This time of night, people are doing 40 miles an hour in Langham Road.
I always use the wraparound now, I never did it before.
Okay, I'm sorry, we can't hear if you don't have a microphone.
He said he now uses it as a wraparound as well, because it makes it easier to get out from one road to the other, from Teddington High Street.
Okay, thank you.
And I want to know whether any assessment has been made of the impact and whether anything has been done about it.
Okay, who wants to take that one?
Well, so we've had various representations about that roundabout. I'm yet to have a favourable one. So a number of people have raised issues with it, either from a safety point of view, has been mentioned, because it looks like at the moment it's designed so it's too straight actually in a way if you're coming from the Kingston direction, so people tend to go straight on. So I know that the people living on the corner are concerned that they've heard screening brakes on a number of occasions, so they're concerned about safety. There's also concerns about whether the crossing across Kingston Lane is now more difficult for pedestrians than it used to be. And there's then the question about the impact on Kingston Lane and Langham in terms of it's now easier for people to cut through from Teddington High Street, which I may on one or two occasions have been guilty of myself in my car, because it is, as you say, easier to get out now. I'm not sure how actively the council is listening to those concerns. I mean, the roundabout was put in as a traffic calming measure. So it's one of the many measures that was put in along, there were various measures put in 2016 along Kingston Road. So there was there were some changes to the junction outside Homesdale, where the extended table was put in. the relocations of pedestrian crossings, or Langdon Down Centre for the surgery where it was moved. So very, very sensible things were done and consulted on. That was consulted on, but did get did get approved. I know what they're looking to do is essentially to improve the design of the roundabout, so they're not looking to take it away entirely. They're looking to extend the tables, try and improve the layout of the junction, try and make it clearer to vehicles that are coming from either direction that there is a roundabout there. So there's going to be a consultation. All I can recommend is for people to put their views verbally as part of the consultation. We're clearly listening to that as well. And I recognise it's something that people feel strongly about.
Very good response. That was why I asked about any assessment of the impact, because if it was designed as a traffic calming measure, it's been manifestly unsuccessful. And so anything you can do to facilitate some review of that and actions that might assist in improving the roundabout, if that's what's got to be there, but also dealing with the issue in Langdon Road.
Thank you. Any more questions? Sorry, there's a gentleman here, near to the microphone.
Ian Burgess, Hampton Wick. Just for statistical purposes, there are 48 people in this hall tonight. Not a bad number for a public meeting, but in relation to the population of the area concerned, it's minuscule. We had at a meeting on Eel Pie Island in this very hall last Friday, 85 people. That's just one point. Regarding people cycling on pavements, in 82 years, no cyclist has ever collided with me. But in the last 20 years, we've had portable telephones. I wish I had a pound in my pocket for everyone who's collided with me looking down at their little screen. But
Ian, could we have your question, please?
Oh yes. How are we going to advertise these meetings to get more people to them?
Thank you. Yeah, who's going to go for it?
Well, I can answer this. We had our surgery, which we promoted to the people who come in there. We talk to our constituents on an ongoing basis. It is marketed through the Hampton Wick Association. They sent out an email today advertising it. So we do put it out there and push it and talk to people as much as we can. And we do encourage people to come to these things because they are very important, and we get to discuss these issues. So if there's any way or suggestions that you feel we could be improving on that, please feel free to let us know. But we push a lot out, and we do put pamphlets and encourage people to.
Okay. We're going to make you walk all the way around there to the lady in the pink on the side.
We've had one or two questions tonight about protecting green space, and one of the biggest green spaces in our area that voters on Hampton Wick and Teddington is the Ugly Park playing field that you mentioned earlier. I'm here on behalf of the Teddington Society, and we're disappointed at how long the local green space review has taken. We'd just like to be assured that the councillors are all on board as part of your election pledge that you would oppose any development at all on this land. The inquiry is imminent, and we wonder if you could get together with the Teddington Society, Sport England, the Friends of Ugly Park playing fields, and just give each other support going forward in this next month. It's getting quite a crucial time.
Okay. Yep.
We are all absolutely opposed to the development of Ugly Park, and so we've said we were opposed, and we remain opposed, and we still are. How we absolutely pursue that and make sure that we stick within the planning guidelines, and we have to take advice there from the professional officers in the council as the best way to pursue that. And having said that, I'm going to hand over briefly now to someone who knows more about this than I do, because he's in charge of the area, is Councillor Ellingbourne again.
How's the crossword going?
Yeah, we're giving you a really good workout tonight, aren't we?
I've given up on the crossword. I correct Councillor Brown. Now we have a committee system. No councillor is in charge of anything, but I do chair the Environment Committee, and I'm the chap that the officers consult on this sort of thing. We are, in fact, I've been involved in correspondence today about the inquiry and the local green space decision. And the good news, almost unexpectedly good news, is that the planning application appeal inspector says he will not make a decision until the local green space issue has been settled. So it means it could be fairly delayed after the November public inquiry on the planning application, and he will wait until it's either firmly in the local plan that it's a local green space, or the decision has been made and not legally challenged, which is always possible either way, as to it not being a local green space. I should say that we have extremely strong planning arguments against development, whether or not it's designated as local green space. That's an additional thing. It's other open land of townscape importance. It's a sports facility, and Sport England are opposing it on those grounds. So there are multifarious reasons against. We keep in close touch with the other bodies concerned, but we have to work on the basis of the Planning Committee's decision and our local plan policies. And we also have to take account of the future. So we can't start developing policy that will be restrain us in a way that will be a problem once the bottom have gone away. So we are working very closely with other bodies, but we have to understand our different functions in this. We're employing a Queen's Counsel to make our case. Our planning officers, when they turn up on the witness bench, they have to give their evidence as planning officers and stick to planning policies. And we can't instruct them to go against their professional judgment. But it's been an unusual application because from the very start, Quantum have taken no notice of the advice given to them by the planning officers. This is an extremely unusual situation. And I think, like other things going on in this nation at the moment, they are heading for a big fall. But we'll wait and see.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, if we go to, we've got 20 minutes of questions. There's a lady there, then we'll go to Chris.
I'd just like to make a few comments, and I've got a couple of questions. As far as advertising this meeting, it was not easy to find on the council website because I wanted to look up the deadline for submitting questions. I knew the date of the meeting, but I hadn't written down the deadline. I did find it in the end, but it wasn't easy. I expected to see it on the front page of the council website, which it wasn't. A comment on the 20 miles per hour.
Can we get to your question first, please?
Right. Just two very short questions then. Did Jim say that the police station, the Twickenham police station, was going to move to Teddington? Or is that on a temporary basis?
Yeah, just temporarily, I believe.
Right.
That there's going to be some. I believe there's going to be some temporary refurbishment of Twickenham Station. So during that time, the officers from Twickenham may move to Teddington. This is what I believe, having spoken to police. But obviously, those plans are still subject to, confirmation.
Right, but you think it will be on a temporary basis? Then?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, it's a temporary thing. We don't know what the long-term future of Teddington police station is.
Right.
Yes, just to interject, the same with Kingston. I think the plan is to do Kingston Station first. So whilst Kingston Station is being refurbished, officers will, some of them at least, will transfer to Teddington.
Right.
Then they'll go back again, and then the same thing is going to happen with Twickenham Station. And then they'll go back to Twickenham, and then ultimately in long term, the Teddington police station is on the disposal list from the point of view of the police. But there are no definitive plans yet for when that will happen or what the use will be.
Right. I've just got a question on the new contract for rubbish. Where will the rubbish go?
Just stay on your feet, it's a lot easier.
It depends on which bit of waste you're talking about, but the situation regarding residual waste, which is the black bag waste, which you should have very, very little of, because you shouldn't waste and you should recycle where you can. But people talk about landfill. It's years since our waste has gone to landfill. On the same train line, the wagons now continue to South Gloucestershire, where there's an energy from waste facility owned by the West London Waste Authority, which is a 6-borough authority which we are part of. And there it is burnt and the energy is used for the national grid and so on. If you look at the council's website, you'll find the destination of each of the recyclates. It may not be exactly the same under the new contract. It all depends whether we're operating with the same contractor or a different one. But equally, we will do our very best to make sure it's dealt with responsibly. And I have a very excellent vice chair, much, much younger than me, and female, that makes her better just in itself. And she's visited the green waste facility, the food waste facility, and all the other facilities, so we take a very responsible view about this. But the thing I said to start with is we have a waste hierarchy, and reduce is the first priority. But you shouldn't buy things because it's great to recycle them. You need to make good use of what you've got if we're going to make any sense of addressing climate change, because waste and the emissions from dealing with waste are a major contributor to climate change.
Right, okay. And your comment, yes.
On the 20 miles per hour.
Can you speak into
Sorry. On the 20 miles per hour, I was in Hampton recently, and I was on 2 fairly main roads. They did have traffic calming measures on them, and I've been on these roads before, and there was a big difference with the 20 miles per hour. That the traffic was definitely going more slowly. Just one comment, the road markings were very clear, but there seemed to be, in one place, quite a big gap between the road markings, and I did wonder, has the 20 miles per hour finished? So I wondered, is there a standard distance between the road markings, or does it sort of depend on the road?
And the answer to that is I don't know, but we're rolling this out across the entire borough, so we're already getting bits and pieces of feedback as to where maybe signage could be improved, or the location could be better, or there's too much of a gap. So I think the important thing is we keep getting feedback from people, and if for any reason it is unclear, and of course at the moment it's a bit trickier because we're going area by area, so this is all going to be easier once the entire borough is 20 miles an hour apart from any roads that are excluded. But yeah, we get the feedback, then we'll ask the officers to look at it.
And I think that the general rule with the traffic is if you go into a 20 zone, you carry on being 20 until it tells you otherwise.
Yes, but there was this particular part where there did seem a very long gap between the road markings.
Yep.
Just a very quick comment on Crossrail 2. I did go to all the consultation meetings. I had corresponded with them afterwards. I haven't heard anything about that. It seems to be for a very long time. One question that I did raise with them was, were the trains going to be stored overnight? And I was reassured that that would not happen, that those extra lines created would not be used for any storage purposes, and that it would only be used for turning the trains around. And just one more comment on that is that I remember being told that the reason that Teddington wasn't going to be included is that they'd done a survey of commuters, and there was a lot of difference between the number of commuters going through to Teddington and the number of commuters going through to Kingston, and that's how the decision was made.
Yeah, I think that's 6.5 million against 2.5, something like that.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I ask you to pass on to Chris, who's been waving graciously for a while.
It's just a quick one. I mean, most people experience me as being quite often full of hot air, but I have a thing about leaf blowers. And I think we should have a worldwide ban on them. I think people would be far fitter, and it would be far quieter if we could rooms, and I fail to see what on earth contribution they make. I've seen them around the borough, our streets. I mean, I know the council can't do anything about individual private owners of these devices, but I'd like to be reassured that the council operatives don't use them at all. I think we really do need to think about things. All these things now need to come under our purview, and the most ludicrous thing I ever see is some guy with this fiendishly noisy device blowing away 3 leaves and the 78 leaves being replacing it as soon as he's walked away. And it stops conversation in the street. It's hideously antisocial, and I'd like the council to take a position on it.
Thank you.
Who wants to
I think I absolutely agree. It's noise pollution, and it's possibly the most useless. We're tackling climate change. Some things need engines. Clearly don't need engines to get rid of leaves. The only thing that pains me about this is really what I'm going to have to say to you. So I'd love to hand over to Martin Ellingall. He doesn't have to.
No.
Well, to spare Martin for a second, I mean, we do get a huge number of complaints when the leaves are not cleared away quickly enough when they fall. So, and obviously it's hard to predict exactly when the leaves are going to fall. So I think we've managed the last couple of seasons better, but we have to have the contractors springing into action and ready to clear the leaves, because if they're left on the pavements, and we've got a lot of complaints about the danger that causes. Whether that means that we need to use leaf blowers to make it efficient or not, Martin will no doubt
we are assured by our contractors that the tasks we set them can be most expeditiously achieved if we to use leaf blowers when they think that's the right thing to use in a particular situation. One of the things we're looking at is whether we can have the fueling of the leaf blowers and whether they can be electric or batteries. There are problems about the weight of them in those situations. But as has been said, we're a borough full of trees, and we're also a borough full of people who, when the leaf falls on the ground, they regard themselves as in serious danger of falling over on the leaf. And we have to somehow match those two things together and operate as well as we can. And every autumn is different. We don't know what this autumn's going to be like. Sometimes there's a sharp frost when all the leaves fall together. Sometimes they fall over a long period. Sometimes it's wet, sometimes it's dry, and our contractors have to make the best of it.
Thank you. The lady in the grey muff.
I'm Judith Rutherford, living on Langham Road. Thinking back to the last conversation, which was at Teddington School for this area, there was a lot of concern about sort of perceived overdevelopment in Hampton Wick, including the riverside development and the Haymarket building and things. There was also a talk about St Mary's University and its expansion plans, and I haven't really been able to follow that specific issue, and I was wondering if it's possible to get an update from the panel, please, on that.
The simple update on that is there hasn't been an update, so I have heard, but it's a bit anecdotal, that following that initial consultation and various plans were put out for consultation by St Mary's, there was a bit of a rethink that then went on. I think they were looking at whether some of the demand projections were, as maybe a bit optimistic in terms of what they were looking at. So unless anybody else knows anything different, I think it's all gone quiet in terms of the proposals for St Mary's.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question, and so I'm going to give Chris. It has to be a short one because we're closing the questions in about 5 minutes.
It's purely a comment, really an observation that while we've been talking about parts of the road being taken away or designated as safe zones for cycles, it's the motorist who pays the road fund licence and the excise duty. And the question associated with that, if anybody has any information, is there any move towards cyclists paying for sharing the roads?
I think the move towards that is getting motorists onto bicycles.
I would say that contrary to what everybody's probably thinking about me, the only time I really use my car is when I go out the borough and I'm able to use a bus or a train. In other words, I'm going out of London. So, I'm with everybody else for cycling, walking, buses, trains, wherever possible. So please don't get me wrong.
one thing the taxation system can do is nudge people in the direction that we want them to go. And we want them to go on their bikes and on foot. We would rather they use those modes of transport than the car. So we will continue to support the idea that we will nudge people in that direction and therefore will not be charging them to use their bikes.
Who's we?
Well, that would be I would say, from a Lib Dem point of view, that would be our policy. I'm sure the government would also have that as well, because the mayoral policy is to encourage people for active transport. So there's a mayoral policy, council policy, and probably a government policy. And promote active travel. That's the majority. We're all trying to promote active travel.
In its own good time, I'm not against that. And and voters are going to change. We're going to see, I think it's almost definite, autonomous vehicles. You won't, in future, probably own a car. You'll call it up like a taxi. So, if you need a car, obviously, walking is great. It keeps you healthy. It keeps the national health budget down.
Okay.
I think you just answered your own question.
Yeah, this answered your own question. Now, unless there is anyone who's thought of a final question, this is your chance, I'll bring this part of the meeting to an end. And the absolutely riveting budgets.
Oh yes. Well,
we're giving it to an actor to make it a bit more interesting.
okay. Well, thank you. Ward budgets. Yes, this is something that we're introducing, and partly speaks to what you were mentioning earlier, the need to engage with the community, and these conversations, I hope, will become more and more well attended. And one of the things that I think is key to that is that we as ward councillors will have a fund allocated to us to spend on local issues, and this is an opportunity to engage with local residents, to talk about what our ward priorities are and what those funds should be spent on. It's not just about these conversations. There will be other opportunities to engage with us on this. But this is the start of it, and you probably, for those of you who've already looked at the interactive map and the whiteboard and put your comments on, thank you very much. Do take the opportunity afterwards to write on the whiteboard or on a post-it and put it on there. It's very useful as a way of starting that. And it's all about us honouring our manifesto commitment to get engaged with local people, making sure people have a say in spending local funds to influence decisions that have an impact on our lives. So that's what's going to happen. The money will come from existing funding streams, such as, for example, Civic Pride, Community Fund, possibly from some departmental budgets. Money comes to us from the Community Infrastructure Levy, which is, as some of you may know, you mentioned the big developments that have happened, you mentioned Tennyson Riverside. Those developers do contribute significant sums to the council to pay for local spending, and this is an opportunity for some of that to come to us and to be spent on small things. And also, of course, Bullen Hall, that's the sort of bigger kind of stuff which has to go through a different process. It's necessarily more time consuming and more rigorous because it's for larger sums. But this is a chance to do smaller things in our communities. I'm a big fan of people getting together to make a difference in their community. This is a way that we can listen to some of those ideas that people have and go, yes, why don't we make that happen?
Okay, I think that brings the business of this meeting to a close. Thank you so much for all of your questions. There is still the opportunity to look at the map at the back and add your comments. But can I just say a huge thank you to the councillors, to our extra councillors who had a harder time tonight than perhaps they were expecting. But thank you. Thank you so much for your questions. Thank you so much for coming, and have a safe journey home. Thank you.
And could I just say a quick thank you to Karen. You've come out with your broken leg, which we're very sorry about. Chaired it very calmly and excellently as we knew you would do, so thank you for that.